before we dive into the movie, I think, to set the foundation, maybe you could talk a little bit about your background, your career, and your journey to become the commanding officer of Top Gun.
Sure. Started flying F-18s right out of flight school. You and I did my JO tour together in VFA-14, TOPHATTERS. Came out of that tour, got selected to go to Top Gun as a junior officer instructor on the Top Gun staff. And then kind of did the normal progression for the next several years throughout all that. Was command selected, so took over a fighter squadron, operational fighter squadron. And then about a year into that tour, senior Navy leadership came to me and said, "Hey, what do you think about going to Top Gun after this tour?" And that's one you think about for all of 5 seconds or so, and you just go and you say yes and enjoy the ride after that.
So your time at Top Gun as commanding officer kind of coincided with the making of this movie, is that right?
It did, yeah. About 3 months into my command tour there, I got a call from Hollywood saying, we're going to film a movie, and here we come.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So at a high level, can you talk a little bit about that initial interaction with the cast and crew and what that was like?
Sure. Who called initially was the director, Joe Kosinski, in conjunction with the Tailhook president. They had reached out to Tailhook as kind of their entry point. And so we flew down to LA, sat down with the director and the producer and talked about the director's vision, and kind of put together the big structure for how we were going to film the movie and the schedule and so forth. And then we did a first meeting, which was a phone call just over the phone with Tom Cruise, and got his vision for what he wanted to do. And then we just started working it. And, with the vision really, and why the movie is so great and it turned out so great is Joe Kosinski, the director, really wanted to make it realistic. That was his first and primary goal. And then Tom, which I did not know this beforehand, Tom is a pilot. I mean, he flies jets, he flies helicopters. He's very passionate about being a pilot. The P-51 you see in the movie is his actual P-51. And so he came at this in his own words. He wanted to develop a love letter to aviation.
Wow.
And so he was very passionate about how this movie was going to come together and how we were going to portray not only naval aviation and do a sequel to Top Gun, but really just aviation in general.
Oh, that's fantastic. So did they come to you with a fully developed script at that time, or were you involved in having to do any rewrites or corrections or anything?
Yeah, they did come with a script. They've been working on it, I want to say about 3 or 4 years prior to us getting involved. And we had a number of naval aviation leaders that were part of the initial script writing and so forth and kind of putting the big chunks together. The script that we got, we definitely made some changes to just throughout the filming and as the story developed and as the storyline and so forth. So there was definitely some changes, but they came with a probably 80% product on the initial phone call.
Oh, fantastic. Are there any elements of the script that you can maybe you can talk about that needed to be changed, that were sticking points, or those need to stay behind closed doors?
No, I don't think they do. I think we hit kind of 2 layers of issues. One is the professionalism of naval aviation and of Top Gun. We kind of had to, we have our own red lines. And so we had to sort of stay, south of those red lines. So there was a couple issues that came up there that they wanted to do that may have been, seemed funny for a movie, but we would have looked at and said, well, actually we would have taken somebody to captain's mast for that. So we can't do that. Probably the bigger one that we had was if you recall the ejection in the movie, and it was Phoenix that ejected. They wanted the initial story kind of had that as a mistake that she made, and then that caused the ejection. And we looked at that and said, no. Look, women fighter pilots already have it tough. They have to prove themselves, or at least feel like they have to prove themselves more than male fighter pilots. And even though that's not necessarily true, but we certainly didn't want to make it harder by making it her fault in the storyline. So we said, hey, we need to come up with an alternate reason for why she ejects, or we make somebody else eject in the storyline. And then we had some minor ones too. As you well know, Stork, we have our own language in naval aviation, and so we wanted, in the vein of making it realistic, we wanted the language to be realistic and so forth. And at one point, we actually had Tom come up to us and say, look, I know you guys want to say it this way, but I can't have the audience trying to figure out what it is we're talking about. And when they're doing that, they're not watching the movie. And so there was a kind of some learning that we had to go through as well to accept, saying things differently or being a little bit different than how we would normally represent ourselves, if you will.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about the flying, the actual flying scene preparation and conduct. I definitely was very impressed with the flying. A lot of the maneuvers were kind of folded together and that type of thing. But all the maneuvers I saw were actual maneuvers that we would perform tactically. So what was the preparation like and execution? Who flew those flying scenes and those sorts of things?
So who flew was 95% junior officers. I wanted to give back to the JOs. This was a very unique opportunity. Hollywood doesn't come knocking on Naval Aviation's door very often. And especially on the Top Gun staff. I mean, those guys are working 16 to 18 hours a day, 5 days a week, sometimes 7 days a week. And so I wanted to give back to them right away. And then we started to expand that because I wanted to put the spotlight on Lemoore as well. So we went down the Lemoore flight line and grabbed some junior officers there. So 95% of the flying you see is us highlighting the talent and the professionalism of our junior officers. The other 5% were kind of one-offs that we brought in. The low-level scene, which Tom calls the Lawrence of Arabia scene, where the Hornet is down, at 50-ish feet. That was Blue Angel that we brought in, who had years of doing it that low. And so we brought him in to shoot that scene. And we brought in some other, just a little bit more complicated. Maybe the ORM was a little bit higher level of safety concern. And so we brought in, more senior guys to fly just one of those specific scenes. But primarily what you're seeing is our junior officer corps flying.
Oh, fantastic. Well, good for you guys for spreading the wealth.
Yeah. And then as far as the prep, I actually had the Top Gun dogfighting SME, the 1v1 SME. He was the one that put all the scenes together. And so we just took those in chunks and filmed them in very, very small chunks. And then ultimately the editors put it all together.
Well, let's shift a little bit and discuss the storyline. I thought that the mission was fairly interesting. Were you and the Top Gun staff a part of putting that mission together and throwing together all kinds of bad threats to create that?
Yeah, we were part of it. We had one of our early technical advisors who was Captain Retired Chaser Keithley. He put together the big construct of it's going to be a low altitude ingress and there's going to be surface to air missile threats and so forth. And then we sort of built off of his concept, which was a great starting concept. So we built off that and backed it up from the combat scenes all the way to the training scenes, and we put all that together, or really the JOs put all that together.
That's fantastic. It's good to hear that Chaser was a part of that. That's that's wonderful.
Key.
And the decision to leave the enemy ambiguous, I thought that was kind of a brilliant move too. And it was maybe a nod to the first movie because it was sort of the same way. But was that purposefully done to?
That was, yeah. As you well know, we're transitioning not only in the Navy and naval aviation, but across the DoD to more peer adversaries and kind of walking ourselves out of the desert that we've been in for the last 20 years. And so the director and I talked quite a bit about, are we going to communicate a single one of these adversaries as we focus on kind of three primary ones, or are we going to make this ambiguous? And we decided ambiguous was the way to go. And so that's why you'll see various elements. You think nuclear facility drives you right to Iran, but then we throw in Su-57, so we make that a little confusing. So we really wanted to go for ambiguous on this one.
Yeah, Iran was my first thought, and I told my wife immediately it was Iran, and then the Su-57s made the appearance.
Yeah.
So that threw me completely off. So let's talk about the Felon for a little bit. How did that make its appearance into the mission? How did you guys pick that? When this script was in development, I think that they were probably still developing that aircraft, and none of them had been delivered, certainly. So how was that chosen?
That was partly chosen for the ambiguity. And then, as we looked at, we wanted to bring in 5th gen. The choice was J-20s or Su-57s. And we just liked the way the Su-57 looked on film better. And so that's what we ended up choosing at the end.
And so look, the look of it on film, how was that done? I'm assuming that there was some skin added at some point during post-production. What type of aircraft was actually flying, if any?
Yeah, so the actual aircraft was a Super Hornet.
Okay.
And then they CGI'd the Su-57 over the top. And when we did the very first meeting down in LA for the film, they actually had the CGI team there in the facility. And at the end of the meeting, as we're getting ready to walk out, they pulled us over there, introduced us to the CGI team. And oh, by the way, there was maybe 5% at most of this film was CGI. I mean, almost everything you're seeing was really done. But the CGI team pulls us aside. We get on YouTube and they find a video, which was a F-22 air show demo. So he takes that video, downloads it, he overlays the Su-57 on top, compresses it, and then plays it back. And that took all of maybe 5 minutes. And no kidding, having watched him go through that process and then seeing the final product, I couldn't tell that that was not an actual Su-57. I mean, their technology was just incredible. And you see it in the film. There's close-ups of the Su-57. It looks absolutely real, but really what it is a Super Hornet that's CGI'd over the top.
So you talked a little bit about the people early on, sharing the wealth a little bit. Let's talk about them a little bit more. What personality or skills traits, we got to see the whole gamut kind of at extremes in the movie, but what personality or skill traits make a good Top Gun instructor? What were you looking for when you were commanding officer?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we went around and around with this with the script itself. Any good movie has to have that antagonist and so forth. And so that was going to play a persona that just doesn't apply in naval aviation, as you well know, that over cocky sort of sense of entitlement. So what we look for at Top Gun, and this really may surprise a lot of people, in that we're not looking for confidence, we're not looking for overconfidence, we're not even looking for talent first and foremost. First and foremost, we're actually looking for passion. Working on the Top Gun staff and being a strike fighter instructor and so forth, it takes a lot of your time. You have to be passionate about doing this job and doing it right. So first and foremost, we look for passion and the willingness to do the hard work. Second to that is actually personality. And this is probably, when we have students go through the course, if we kick them out of the course, it's usually for personality, first and foremost. And what we're really looking for there is humility. We need somebody that can take a hard look at how they just executed a fight and be hard on themselves and learn from their mistakes and then be better the next time they jump in the airplane. So humility is by far first and foremost the personality trait that we're looking for. And then beyond that, just no overcockiness, no overconfidence, that kind of stuff. And then the last piece is talent. It doesn't need to be, it's a third priority for a reason. You just need to have a baseline talent. But if you have the passion and you have the personality and humility, we'll develop the talent from there. But you have to know how to fly an airplane. You have to have baseline talent, but you don't have to be necessarily good in the jet to come to the course. We're going to get you good in the jet.
Yeah. From what I remember, there was very little attrition. It seemed like that the selection process took care of the attrition. You sort of ensured that what arrived on the doorstep of Top Gun was going to graduate for the most part. Is that accurate?
Absolutely. Yeah. When we do a class selection, it's several hours long. We go person by person. The JOs on the Top Gun staff actually do the selection. So even me as a skipper, I didn't voice an opinion, or at least it was rare that I ever voiced an opinion. I let them do it because typically they're closer to the candidates and they're aware of the candidates to a better degree than I am, and their overall personality and passion and so forth. And so we'll spend 3 to 4 hours going through about 12 people in total, 15 people maybe as far as candidates go. And then we'll pick the final 10 or so to go through the course. So it's a very in-depth process to pick that talent. And usually what'll happen when we do dismiss somebody from the course, which may on average be 1 or 2 a year, usually it's a personality trait that just nobody saw that came up under the stress of the course. And we just can't work with that personality trait for some reason or other. And we just have to say, okay, I think our time is done here. Yeah. But like I said, that's very, very rare because the selection process is very detailed.
Well, so any final thoughts? You know, I want to give you the floor, and you know, what would you like viewers of the movie to take away from the theater when they leave, beyond some of the stuff we've talked about here? Is there anything else that you'd like for them to leave with?
You know, honestly, I'd like them to leave with pride in the American military. You know, again, what we're showing is realistic. There were cameras in those airplanes. As I mentioned, it was junior officers, so we're showing you our most junior talent and what we're capable of as naval aviation and as a military. And I think we lose sight of that. The fight that we've been fighting for the last 20 plus years, you know, didn't really do much for naval aviation, or people just didn't talk about that kind of stuff because it was just a different fight. I mean, we certainly had a critical role in that fight. But as we move into this realm where we're back into great power competitions and in a pseudo Cold War, similar to the 1980s, as we look towards Russia and we look towards China, I want them to walk out of the movie theater going, yep, our military is still the best in the world. And if we ever need the military to jump in and face Russia or China or any other great power adversary, they can do it. We have that pride and we have that trust in them. They can do it. And we know that. You and I see that. We grew up in this environment. I still see it every single day, the professionalism of our military. And you know, the movie is an opportunity to highlight that and remind people that there's a lot of brave individuals that are still out there every single day, whether we're in combat or not, that are training for great power competition and great power combat. Mm-hmm. And they're doing it right, and they're very, very talented.
210s are on a ball, 67 auto. Roger, ball auto, 25 knots.